Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info, coming at you a couple hours after the conclusion of this morning's conclusion of the FireKeepers 400 at Michigan, where, now that we have the results of post-race inspection long ago, we can confirm that Chris Buescher has now scored his second consecutive victory, his third in the last 2 years since RFK Racing's reincorporation. A tremendous battle between himself and Martin Truex Jr. for the victory there. Congratulations to him, and is now still with several races before the playoffs start. He now not only finds himself solidly in the playoffs, but now with a chance to really kind of work his way up the rankings. We will see how he performs on the road courses here the next couple of weeks. Obviously, he has some experience there as well as a past Mid-Ohio winner in the Xfinity Series, but a tremendous effort for him. Definitely a bit of an old-school throwback there to have the number 17 car back in victory lane at Michigan. It used to be not too long ago that Roush Racing pretty much owned the keys to that track with the likes of Carl Edwards, Matt Kenseth, Greg Biffle, and, of course, Mark Martin. It's been a few years since then. A lot of things have happened one way or the other. But again, a great effort for both of them. Brad Keselowski right up there in the fourth spot too. Tremendous battle for the both of them there. And it was not a good day for every driver out there, that's for sure, as it is in any race. Because now that we can confirm with the results of post-race inspection that Kyle Busch has now had his second last place finish in just over a month. First one since Loudon, where Lastbro was attending not too long ago. An early crash that Kyle seemed pretty upset about, understandably, where the team was saying that Ryan Blaney was racing him a little bit too hard. And on Sunday, Kyle Busch had wrecked out of the race there and finished in last place the first time. Car number 8 has finished last in a Cup Series race at Michigan since 1998, where Morgan Shepherd was filling in for Hut Strickland at the Stavola Brothers team, the Circuit City Chevrolet that day, another red and white paint scheme, very different from the one that we saw this past week. I know that there were some people comparing it to Joe Nemechek's Dentine paint scheme, and I could definitely see the comparison there at the same time. But it turned out to be the very beginning of a series of misfortunes. Really, I was about to say pretty much all in turns 1 and 2, but actually drivers were finding problems in all corners here. We pretty much had an all-star bottom 5 when all was said and done here. Pulling up the results here again. Chase Elliott, and I'm seeing comments about this already hopping in here. Chase Elliott absolutely in a much more difficult position here now next to these next few races. One would think he would be a shoe-in for a track like Watkins Glen, at least in years past. But now in a situation where he would have to win one of these races, I think despite the rally that he has mounted here these last several races, this is definitely a difficult situation, especially with who was up front there and who was gaining a lot of stage points, including Daniel Suarez and Bubba Wallace. It's going to be an uphill battle, and there is the very real possibility that the 2020 Cup Series champion does not make the playoffs. Not unprecedented. We've had times before, like drivers like Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart missing the playoffs. In fact, that was one of the first things that extended the playoffs from 10 drivers to 12, and then ultimately up to 16, where we find ourselves today. But I shudder to think if there's going to be any more expansion of the field these days here, given the fact that that's already more than what would it be? More than a third of the full-time drivers out there already make the playoffs as is. But regardless, there's going to be drivers on the outside looking in. And on top of this, we already have a pretty tight battle for the last spot to get in the playoffs here. Bubba Wallace making big advances here. AJ Allmendinger still in the mix. Daniel Suarez, several others. It's going to be interesting. And with a mix of road courses and, of course, the playoff cutoff race at Daytona and all the unpredictability of that event, it's anybody's guess who we're going to exactly have at the playoffs here at the end. But yes, 3 Hendrick cars in the bottom 5 spots here. 2 of them settled in yesterday's portion of the race. Chase Elliott with a flat tire that put him into the outside wall coming off of turn 2. Good to see him walk away from that afterwards, but clearly just nothing the team could do to fix that car and send him back out there. But we'll see what happens on that end. And then coming to the end of stage one, William Byron getting bounced off the outside wall, coming to the stripe. Looked like they were probably going to be able to make the repairs. It didn't seem like he had such serious damage that would cause like a fender rub. But clearly the issue with the toe link there on both the right front and the right rear was too much for the team, to, even a team like Hendrick, with the resources that they have, too much for them to get back out there. The crash clock actually expired, which is why the DVP is listed as his reason out instead of an accident there. And while it seemed like it was just a glancing blow out there, it was more than enough to take him out of the event there and finish in the 35th spot. So a driver with multiple wins this year, finding trouble as well. And then Alex Bowman with a tangle on the backstretch today in the remaining portion of the race. A car stranded on the track, much like Joey Logano at Pocono. And NASCAR apparently has still not resolved the issue from the Logano incident of trying to improve their towing procedure and get cars back to pit road quicker. This, in this case, having a very lengthy caution again. I'm not sure how much more damage was suffered to the 48, but ultimately steering problems listing him out of the event after leading 19 laps and him still not being able to complete the race distance there. I personally think that maybe setting up some kind of rollers that they could put under the front wheels so at least the body's not dragging on the ground with all these ground effects that are on the cars and the front valent or the splitter and everything else. You just got to get that off the ground. I think maybe a flatbed might be a little bit too much. Maybe that would take too long to actually load on the hauler because we're talking about something that's going to be quick enough. But certainly with the, it seems like they're able to hook the rear of, or the front of these cars up to the tow truck pretty quickly with that new device that they've introduced here on the steps machines here since 2022. But they're able to get that portion of the car off the ground. The other problem is really on the other end of it. And I think that's the most obvious solution. Just get some kind of, because it's, again, very much like when they load these cars up in the hauler, they got to put them on carts. If the car can't roll onto the lift gate there, they have to put some kind of a dolly or something like that underneath it. I think Logano's solution of trying to have somebody on there that's going to bolt on new tires, I think that's a bit much. I think especially if the damage is serious enough where the car still can't get there because the steering's broken or anything else, you don't need our crews taking even more time to try to figure that out. Just get the thing off the track. I mean, the speed of these issues, I think, is the biggest factor in all this. And I think that's probably the easiest solution. And it's unfortunate that we've seen this now at a couple of two of the biggest tracks on the circuit between Michigan and Pocono here. Not the biggest, but certainly ones that have brought this into focus here. I'm surprised that solution hasn't been advanced yet. Maybe NASCAR is waiting on next season, so it doesn't have any factor in the playoffs. But unfortunately, we have seen playoff caliber drivers in both Bowman and Logano having this issue. Not to say that it wouldn't be an issue if it were a small team either, but should apply to just everybody. But I think that would be the next step to look forward to. I don't know what exactly steps they need to take, but hopefully that's something that they're at least considering at this point. Also in the bottom five there, Josh Berry taking the relief driver role there for Noah Gragson after his suspension. And we will be talking about that tonight. We'll kind of finish up kind of our Cup race review here, and then we'll go into certainly that and the other big story from this weekend. This week, rather, that being Jimmie Johnson's induction into the Hall of Fame. I think that requires a separate discussion of its own, and we'll get into that there too. But continuing on with the race results here, Tyler Reddick, terrible luck again. Bad pit stops, bad, just bad in general. Loose right rear wheel, sending him back to pit road and screwing up his run there. Denny Hamlin had an issue with his car stalling and then kind of minimized the issue with how much that negatively affected his own run. But for Reddick, finishing 3 laps down in the 30th spot, undoubtedly that car had more speed than that, certainly by taking the lead before the race was moved to today for its conclusion. Had a fantastic run out there. I know I mentioned that it kind of looked like the Bell South car, certainly the 1999 version of it, or probably even the 98 version with the white front end there, but this being the Rocket League paint scheme. And we've seen this a number of times, and I know a lot of people have been already pretty outspoken on this, and I'd have to join the chorus on this, that 2311 is going to have to really figure this out here. I don't know what it is with this 45 team here, but they've just had some bad luck. We've seen this with Bubba Wallace's crew in the past, and now it seems to have kind of leaked over to the 45 crew. But we'll see. Hopefully they get that figured out here because, time's ticking before the playoffs, and a mistake like that could be enough to just knock you out of it altogether. You can't afford to have that many bad days, especially when you got a car that fast. You need to capitalize on it. And we've certainly seen the effect of that too with Buescher pulling off the victory today. And again, just in these last 2 weeks, much like we saw with Harvick last year when he won these 2 races, look how quickly that can advance you into being a real contender, not just to get past the first round of the playoffs, but perhaps to even advance to the championship 4. But we'll see how that all shakes out at the same time. Looking at some of the underdog teams out there, J.J. Yaley, the 27th spot, 28th, going for Austin Hill in the Beard Motorsports effort, the only open team in this one here, so still finishing further back in the order. Todd Gilliland. I was listening to just the radio portion of this for today's race here. I just watched the highlights at lunch to kind of fill me in on some of the other events that were happening in today's portion of the race. Of course, I was watching it yesterday when the last place position was settled. So that was a reason to kind of change that up. But it sounded like a very competitive race, and certainly watching the closing laps there and that pass that Buescher forced Truex into, basically like just the two of them, neither of them blinking, going into that first corner and passing Michael McDowell's lapped car there. I mean, just massive. Wonderful, clean racing, and just forcing our driver into a mistake, or just like who's going to blink first, who's going to overdrive the corner or not. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this as a defensive maneuver in Pocono, where you have a car that's chasing another one up a track. Of course, Denny Hamlin still getting hounded with criticism for the way that he won his Pocono race after chasing Larson into the wall, similar to the incident between Larson and Bubba Wallace at Las Vegas and other incidents that we've seen this year. But this time here, I think we saw the positive aspect of it, that again, drivers kind of chasing each other to the bottom lane and really trying to dare each other to see how fast they could go in there. Wonderful. Absolutely tremendous racing. I think that yesterday we saw some quality racing too, although it was punctuated by a lot of cautions there. I don't think a lot of wrecks is necessarily a requirement for great racing. I've said it here many times. It's not the National Association of Stock Car Auto restarts. We don't need several restarts to have that be exciting. We could have plenty of long green flag runs, as we did similar to portions of today's race here. I think it was very entertaining and very similar to Pocono from the last couple of weeks ago. The fact that this is now the only Michigan race on the schedule for the Cup Series, I think, has also increased the appreciation for this race. Now, the one drawback, of course, is what happened this weekend with the rain that has been so persistent in every event this year. It seems like the fact that not all of the fans out there were able to stay over and watch this race today, which is too bad because it was such a competitive event. That is the drawback of if they do reach a point in NASCAR to scale back to one race per track. But again, I think that the benefits of that outweigh the others, because I think this race here was a wonderful feature of just how competitive Michigan can be. It can also be very brutal at the same time. It could be an issue with tires, or it could be an issue with very slight damage, or just a mistake on pit road can just completely take you out of it. And while you could have drivers climb their way back in there, like Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell, who had suffered damage on Sunday and still charged back up there to finish in the top 15. Tremendous run out of him. I was wondering, especially after Bell got in that wreck at the end of New Hampshire, a race that he also seemed to have pretty well in hand. I was wondering if Christopher Bell would be the kind of driver that would drive very well in a damaged car. I know that the tolerance of how much damage you could sustain has changed quite a bit, certainly with the next-gen car. But it was still refreshing to see somebody be able to come back out there with some last-minute repairs there within the crash clock's parameters and get back out there and get a decent finish. So kudos to him and the Joe Gibbs Racing Group. I think it could certainly be argued that he had one of the best cars out there, although Truex's car seemed like he could pull out and pass any time. And I think that speaks again to just how much of an accomplishment it was for Buescher to really put him to task and actually get the lead here at the same time. So kudos to them. So again, wonderfully competitive race. Really, I enjoyed both phases of it, both watching it on Sunday and listening to it today. I'm still kind of getting, it seems like a lot of the discussions here are really kind of bringing that up too. So we'll see how that shakes out. Bubba Wallace looked very fast here today. He got up to the lead very early on there after the race restarted, but drops back after leading 21 laps. It finishes back in the 18th spot. Then further up there, we saw a little bit of a tangle there between Ryan Blaney and Corey LaJoie as well. A little bit of an unusual battle between drivers. Blaney coming back to finish in the 9th spot. Eric Jones with a fine run, and congratulations to him and his wife on their marriage up in their home state at Michigan here leading into this event, so tremendous for them. But Jones himself, fantastic. He looked very fast yesterday, and he picked up right where he left off today, working his way up about third place there at one point there in the 43 car. And again, the Legacy Motor Group, I know they've had their share of issues this year, and we'll certainly get into that again. But for Jones there, I mean, just fantastic. It always does my heart good to see the number 43 run as well as it has, as did Ty Gibbs in this race. I like that, suddenly in his interview, he's disappointed with an 11th place finish, which I think is quite eye-opening. This so soon after his first top 5 at Pocono a couple weeks ago. Again, I think the sky's the limit for him. I was expecting him to win in the first third of the season. We're now well past that. But as he is also part of that group that's fighting to either get in or stay in the top 16, he's going to absolutely be one to watch here in this stretch run of the season. But again, I think even more with him, although he did win his first Xfinity race on the Daytona Infield Road Course, is that going to carry over to the Indianapolis Infield Road Course or Watkins Glen or the other events that we have coming up here? So a lot of questions still to be answered. But again, I think a lot of the intrigue had built up here. Good to see Kevin Harvick in the top 10 again. I think this was another race that I personally thought that he would have a very good chance at pulling off, not just the fact that he won it last year, but so many times in the last few years. I know a lot of that was in the Gen 6 car versus the next gen car, but of course he did win this race last year in this particular car. But still, an 8th place finish out of him, a top 10 streak continuing in as well. So fantastic effort for him as well. I know he was hoping for a victory. I was just kind of thinking on the ride home, what are some other possibilities? Life could only be so good if he managed to pull off the victory at Phoenix this fall, whether as the champion or just even as the driver, just looking to get out of the series on top, especially after how close he came to winning there in the spring. I don't want to overdrive our headlights here and look too far ahead, given the fact that we haven't even set the playoff grid yet. But I think that's another thing to certainly see. Other races that he could, I think personally with this momentum that Harvick has, I'm a big believer in it, and just having consistent good runs. He hasn't been lucking into these either. He's been very hard fought runs here as well. That'll be, I think he can break through at any moment. It's a toss up. He doesn't have to. He's I believe he's still the leader among drivers that have not won this year in terms of the point standings or the playoff standings. So we'll find out how that shakes out. This was also, while it was a terrible day for Hendrick, except for Kyle Larson, it was a great day for Roush Fenway Keselowski and for Team Trackhouse. Coming into the return of Shane Van Gisbergen coming back in next week at Indianapolis, the return of the Project 91 entry. They couldn't have picked a better time to have both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez up there. Suarez in particular, much like Buescher, really putting Truex to task in that battle for the Stage 2 victory there. Truex just barely able to pull ahead. Again, great races throughout the field here, and really enjoyable event. And again, I think it's going to be even more important to have Michigan's place on the schedule with Fontana now off the schedule, although as Kyle Busch mentioned this week, again, very different track, and certainly for him, a very different outcome after he won the last Cup Series race there back in February. But again, fine runs for them. And again, good job by Brad Keselowski. I think that's another driver right up there with Harvick. We could see some veterans get back in there and shake things up here in these next couple of weeks. Harvick or Keselowski. Keselowski's had a number of runs where he was right in the mix with Kyle Busch and Marcus Ambrose those many years. Back about, it's hard to believe it's been more than a decade ago, but honestly, he's still just as good as ever, and hopefully he can kind of keep that going. But Keselowski with the 4th place finish there today, joining his teammate in the top 5. Denny Hamlin recovering to get the 3rd place finish there behind his teammate. A lot of comers and goers, and I'm seeing, it's great too. You can tell another mark of a good finish. I'm just looking at the race results here on the second screen here. A lot of distribution of lap leaders, and I don't think it's just necessarily simply a result of how many cautions we had, although undoubtedly that played a role with pit strategy. But still, a number of different drivers, not only leading once, but leading 10 plus laps out there, and trying to be as competitive as possible. So, yeah, a good event. I got to say, I coming out of this one, feeling very positive on this. And I think it's going to be exciting even more when we get to the Indy road course next week. I was just kind of starting to put together the entry list storylines article. That's why I came on here a little bit later. I was kind of getting a head start on that because there's just so many stories in there. I mean, obviously we got, the road course specialist in both the Xfinity and the Cup Series. Now we got Shane Van Gisbergen also running the Truck Series race at IRP. I mean, it's life can only be so good if SVG somehow manages to pull off his Truck Series debut at one of the most competitive and difficult ovals. But Nice Motorsports has shown a lot of speed. I know they've had some bad luck here at the same time. But Bailey Curry had some great runs in that truck earlier this year. And, he's another talent out there that I think, really needs to get his shot up in the Cup Series as well. But yeah, still very, very exciting. Good to see Austin Cindric have a good run. I was very surprised to hear him in the mix as much. I kept saying, especially on Sundays, like, where did he come from? Especially given the fact that Cindric finished last in this race last year. Great turnaround for him. I mean, I guess he hasn't had that bad of a season. I know it seems like we haven't seen as much of him up there. I don't think it's been as much of a drop-off as winning the Daytona 500, which can always be a double-edged sword. I think certainly this year, Stenhouse has weathered that storm way better than Daytona 500 winners usually do, and certainly better than Cindric did last year. But Cindric, I guess as far as I know, is still in the mix here, trying to get back up there too. Who's to say he can't break through? Certainly, he won the first... I get Cindric and Briscoe confused all the time because they both ran the 60 car in the Xfinity Series at that one point. But again, it'll be it's going to be interesting. I mean, these road courses could shake things up. Todd Gilliland getting a top 5 in the Indy road course race last year. Who knows? But yeah, again, just look at the results here. I'm just looking at who's all up there and fine showings for a lot of these competitors out there. So a lot of positives from here, and I'm glad to have front loaded this. Like Austin Foster, you're thinking about going to IRP? Yeah, he's going to drive the 41 truck, which, as far as I know, is locked in. I don't know 100%. I know they've got a few. They're going to have some DNQs in both the Xfinity and the Truck Series this week, but certainly he's going to be one to watch for sure. So we're going to have a good entry list article this week, and while I'm on the subject of that too. The entry list articles, I pretty much decided I'm going to move those to Fridays, which makes more sense anyway, since it would be right before. I just didn't want to have any of them come up before, after practice has already started. I wanted to kind of have it kick off the weekend. So any weeks like Bristol coming up here where, you got a Truck Series race that's earlier in the week, it'll be up earlier in the week, but more often than not, we'll save it to Friday. And especially with a lot of late breaking stories that usually come up, or different sponsors that jump in here, those will be aspects to talk about too. But yeah, that's kind of going to be the focus coming up here. I got more news on videos coming up for the channel. We'll talk about the Xfinity Series race as well, including the Mike Harmon deal with what I posted on Twitter a couple days ago here. We'll talk about all of that, but I think before we get into any of that, we probably should go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. That would be the two big stories from this week. And I think simply because I'd like to wrap up the show or jump into our trivia segment with things a little bit more positive here. I get, where do you even start between the two stories? Between Noah Gragson's suspension for liking a meme. I could elaborate further on that, but I think there's other details from that, of course. Versus Jimmie Johnson being brought into the Hall of Fame along with Chad Knaus, but neither of them, including Jimmie, being voted in unanimously. Both of these each creating social media firestorms in the result of that. Whether or not that's warranted is up for anybody to discuss and do the same on social media here. I got to say, I've been practicing this in my mind, trying to think about the best way to discuss this. I think the first thing I have to mention really from both of these here is these are the kind of stories I hate talking about. I really do. These are not, as much as I love following this sport and tracking what happens from one day to the next, and how how enjoyable it is. And this is even from somebody in the standpoint of following last place finishers, where often you do see rather rough sides of the sport, or, people in situations that they'd rather not be in. But I do think there's a lot of compelling human drama in there, and also things that are just overlooked in the process. When it comes to stories like these, and both of these, not just the Noah Gragson story, but also the Jimmie Johnson story, it's just unpleasant. It's just unpleasant. And I've stayed out of both of these as much as I can on this. And I think that's because what usually happens in stories like these, when they do turn out, it just comes up out of nowhere, and everybody's got an agenda or whatever to jump up, or people are, debating about it. Although I don't think we should always fear debate. I think that in some cases that needs to come up, and sometimes that's an aspect of, on my side. I don't know about me personally. There's some things I just don't like. I don't enjoy debate as much as others. But yeah, these are stories that I just don't enjoy. So it always comes to a point where, how best to talk about it. Because you can't just pretend it's not happening. So we gotta kind of jump into it. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get fewer viewers here in the show here. But again, so I guess really to go into it. So in case anybody doesn't know, and I'm sure everybody already does know, so Noah Gragson has had an awful rookie season driving for Legacy Motor Club. And we've already seen the concussion that he had back at Gateway, and at the same time, while Legacy Motor Club, and we talked about Eric Jones having the fine run today, and the team itself having things to look forward to next year with Toyota contract, and then of course you have the tragedy of the awful situation that Jimmie Johnson and his wife have experienced here this last month. There's been just a little bit of everything already going on over there. And I think that in a story like this, the context is extremely important, even if the subject of the story seems very straightforward here. So we have a situation here where drivers speaking out, or drivers on social media, or in this case now, drivers liking a meme with their own account, so it's their own name and all that, and then we could have discussion about, burner accounts and so forth, and then somebody finding this information, bringing it to the team's attention so that the team originally suspended Noah Gragson, and then about an hour later, NASCAR comes out and says that Gragson is indefinitely suspended, and so now who's going to drive the 42 car next week? That's another story that, is going to be developing, and we'll find out there. I think the first aspect of it here. So again, the meme had to do with George Floyd, obviously a contentious topic. I think on either side, or whoever can agree on that. And again, if I don't want to get into an argument about, taste or anything like that. I think in that case there's going to be so many different perceptions there. Everybody's different on that. And then of course you have the aspect of, again, you're a public figure. You are a multi-million-dollar athlete. You are working for NASCAR. Again, so you have to be very mindful of what you do and what you say. And there's been a lot of talk about that as well. There should be. I think the drivers should, represent themselves as best as possible. You think back to the Davey Allison video that NASCAR Man put out, and there's a great clip in that video where Davey Allison expresses that, look, it's like, kid comes out there and says, hey, I want to grow up and be just like Davey Allison. It's like he really wanted to work that much harder to put that image out there. This isn't to say that thought wasn't in Noah's mind or anything else. I think the issue, well, there's certainly the constitutional issue that gets brought up all the time. And I know that oftentimes when people bring up freedom of speech or whatever, that, it conflates it, and people are going to say, okay, well, this isn't one of those. Obviously there's a certain code of conduct that these drivers enter into, both with their teams and with NASCAR. And if there's something that's going to infringe on that, NASCAR or the team, as in this case here, are well within their rights to handle that however they could. Exactly. Same thing as with the Kyle Larson thing, same thing with any of these other situations. That's why that's there. And you enter into a contract, you have to abide by the contract. There's that layer of it. So there's no change on that aspect. What I feel compelled to discuss in this context is from a constitutional standard, simply because I've had that background in constitutional law. I was a Witkin Award winner in law school for that subject, and I'm not saying that I'm not still a little bit rusty about that, because that itself was about 10 years ago. But I think the only reason I bring this up is not to say that, Gragson should, fight this and do that. It's like, no, not so much that. I think it's just because when a story like this comes up, you're going to have opposing sides that express clear opinions on what they think freedom of speech is and what freedom of speech isn't. What commonly comes up is the topic that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Strictly speaking, that's kind of true, but it's also not really the full statement of it either. The concept of freedom of speech is the issue that if somebody does, and it's also, before I go any further into this either, it's not entirely freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences. But also it doesn't mean freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want and nobody can do anything. That's also not true. And see, this is where it's kind of important, because that seems to be where everybody's kind of on both sides there. You got some people on that side and you got some people on this side. And unfortunately, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Now there's another aspect, the Z-axis to all this is like, it's only for the government. It's only, if the government does something, it's not going to protect you from NASCAR. It's like, well, that's not really true either. So, and again, I know you didn't sign up on here to watch the show here for a constitutional discussion here, but I feel compelled to bring this up because, again, as my dad always says, sometimes it feels like you need a law degree to read the news, the sports page anymore, because there's contract negotiations and so forth. So I'll piece this together the best I can, and I hope this comes out clearly. This has come up here and there, so and again, I think it's an important thing to track down. So on the one side here, if you basically, if you have an action, the first step you really have is this speech? There's a large part of body of law here where it's like, it's like, is it an overt act? Is it something that you are physically doing? And I think that was one part of the confusion in this story here was, okay, well, wait a minute. Did he make this meme? Did he post this meme? Okay, he liked the meme. Okay, it's like, and I'm sure it's not like the founding fathers anticipated that, what social media even is, never mind likes or anything like that. But you got that first threshold there, and then you got the other threshold about the state actor, and that's also kind of an interesting aspect, because it's not really just a government that does something that would make it what we're all talking about here is if freedom of speech is even a relevant discussion in this at all. Not saying it's going to go in front of the Supreme Court. It's just like, is this even relevant to bring this up? So the other aspect is the state actor one, which, and again, it's not the government, it's a state actor. And there's actually some pretty broad definitions of that term as well. And again, the aspect of it, in fact, actually a lot of rules in the South, if a strict definition of state actor were used, a lot of segregation laws back in the 1960s probably would have never been challenged, or at least not challenged in the way they were. There's a case, the name of it escapes me, but it was describing a restaurant that was excluding people for certain reasons and so forth. But the reason that the store was, even though it was a private business, you could say, oh, this business can do whatever they want. It's like, well, the court decided, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this business, they use government roads. They use government roads to get the food that brings it into the store. So does that not constitute a state actor? And it's like, well, I mean, they could kind of figure that out. There's a commerce clause in the Constitution as well, and that's another function of government. And there's I wish I remembered, I should have written down the case, but there is one that I know that it came up. And that one always stuck with me because it was interesting, because you think that the concept is that. So now, with that still out there and understanding that a state actor thing is broad, do I think that that it's going to be something where a case would come out of this? No, I don't think so. I think that ultimately, again, he's locked into these contracts. There's a code of conduct that you have to work with, and that's it. And obviously, that's a situation. But I want to go back to, again, the debate over freedom of speech, doesn't mean freedom of consequences, versus also saying like, oh, I have freedom of speech, that means I can do whatever I want. Again, both of those are not necessarily true. The reality is kind of right in the middle here. And this is where I kind of bring things back to where it's, where people are debating about this. And the thing I thought that was kind of interesting about this is where there should be a debate about it. Because I think that, it raises interesting questions. I think that, you think about situations where somebody says something or somebody does something, and, if it either puts people in danger or it discriminates or anything like that, there's generally an understanding of that. But the act of liking a picture or liking a meme, what does that constitute? What does that mean? Bob Pockrass had a thing a while back, and again, not saying it was anything that like this that he was liking, mind you, but he was doing research on an article, and he liked a post, and I remember him getting a lot of problems where people were saying, "Oh, Bob, why did you like this? That means that, you agree with this guy." It's like, no, he was doing work on an article, and he's trying to understand, where this guy was coming from. And he said, likes aren't endorsements. Now in this case here with this meme, I think that would be a harder argument to certainly make, but that's another part of it. But again, and it sounds like there's a lot of gray area here in what I'm describing, but that's because there is. And that's why trials exist. That's why debate exists. And so as much as I don't like stories like this, I think it's good that people are debating about this. And I know it gets contentious, as well it should. The freedom of speech is a fundamental right, which means it is elevated to the strictest level of scrutiny. If it were a government actor that infringes on your freedom of speech, set this case aside here. If it was your case and you felt that your freedom of speech was infringed on, the government, it has to be held to the highest standard. They have to convince the court that what they did, what the rule that was put in place, the reason that you got in trouble, basically, in this case, was narrowly tailored to a compelling government interest. And just like anything else in the law, especially constitutional law is like a comparative literature class. Every word is like every little thing. Those words have broad definitions. And that's where you could have two sides that are equally passionate, one saying it absolutely wasn't narrowly tailored, and one saying it absolutely was. And they could both be completely right. My professor said very much that. We would have like intense debates in that class. And that really has stuck with me. It was easily the class I enjoyed the most. I wish it resulted in me being better at debate, because it really doesn't come natural to me. But we're seeing this. And I think that we're seeing this because not so much like, okay, let's argue about this particular case and what picture was liked and what that means and so forth, but more like what that would mean if this ends up being something that could result in, in serious action. What if it is something that could be, that you or I or anybody else could find themselves in that situation? Would we be in the same situation? There were 74,000 other people that liked this tweet. Would it be argued if you found out who any of those people were, should they be held to that same standard too? And again, not saying they should or shouldn't. And in fact, that's the other aspect of the story that got very interesting too. I think that was a very good positive aspect of this debate. One conversation I was participating in really toward on this. Really, I think it was on I guess it was on Saturday before practice. People talking about who is actually disclosing this information. My mind always goes back to 2011 at Homestead and the situation with Kurt Busch, where he was angry. 2001, we'll have to give you some context here. 2011 at Homestead, Kurt Busch is not at all in the playoffs. You got the championships down to Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards, and they're in a tie. Basically, whoever wins the race wins the championship. Most exciting championship you have. Kurt Busch is in the middle of this. He's not a factor in the championship. He's just looking to finish, what's been kind of an up and down year for him. At the beginning of the race, he has something break under his car. Piece of debris comes out, and it punctures the front of Tony Stewart's nose. And in that moment, Kurt Busch thinks, oh my gosh, I've just totally screwed Tony Stewart out of his championship. So he's in the infield. He's at last place. So this is something I was kind of following at the time too, because it was whether he or Michael McDowell were going to finish last. Whole other deal there. But Kurt Busch gets out of the car. Dr. Jerry Punch is about to interview him. Somebody else is videotaping him waiting for the interview, and Kurt's basically just furious. Like, he's muttering under his breath, and he says this or that. I don't even remember what exactly he said. But basically that video clip of him waiting for the interview went viral, and ultimately was the reason that Kurt Busch lost his job with Penske Racing. Now, again, much like with Noah Gragson, a code of conduct that you have to follow. Is he going to make a big thing out of a federal case out of losing your ride? No, that's not going to happen. And much like I don't think that's going to be the case here with Noah Gragson. But the aspect, the thing that bothered me about it was, not so much the person that videotaped it and posted it, because these drivers again are public figures. If you're out in public, I had the same issue already with the pictures of Kyle Larson's car after the wreck at Las Vegas here, and the issues with that. Not so much that, but where that ends up being transmuted into, oh my God, isn't this terrible? And you just take this clip completely out of context, and they just say, oh, he should be fired from this team. He's terrible. He shouldn't be saying this, and da-da-da. And when that process starts, and what I've been encouraged by in this one is there's a little bit of added scrutiny as to that process. And again, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to build on that, but there was a lot of discussion when I was talking about this and saying certain people look for stories like this or look for things like this that happen. If it were me personally, especially in the Kurt Busch thing, if I was the one that filmed that clip, even though I had nothing to do with putting it out there and saying, let me show you this clip that shows how bad of a person Kurt Busch is. If that was something that cost somebody their job, I would feel horrible about that. I would feel terrible about that. But in the social media age, which is way more than it was back in 2011, there are people that have no compunction about that. And whether they feel right or wrong or whatever, again, and that's up for them to figure out, whether they feel that that's worthy and so forth. And just like the debates themselves over these topics, that's what can happen. But at the same time, if it's something that leads to that, I think I'm glad that's getting scrutinized a little more. I sense that in this one here, because where this story would have had to come from, the fact that, again, I don't want to get too far into the field of the meme itself, because I know it's, I just don't want to get into that, because I think we can agree it's at the very least in poor taste, and anything beyond that, I think most people can agree there too. So let's set that aside. Let's just, it's a relevant factor. It's absolutely a relevant factor. Not saying it's not relevant, but if it's at the end of the day, do we want that level of scrutiny for each other? I guess is the question I'm asking. Do we want we've had steps where, okay, you're held accountable for what you say, you're held accountable for what you do. Now in the social media era, you're held accountable for what you post, which I get, because social media can be like the public square and everybody has access to it. And there's terms of service that you enter into to opt to use that, and that's understandable too. But then beyond that, the liking of posts, do we need to have scrutiny for that as well? It's like how much further does it go? And that's I think the question that I think we're all trying to understand in this. And I think it's a relevant discussion. I think it transcends the sport itself. I know this is a NASCAR show. I know we're going well off the beaten path. But again, although I'm not an attorney, I should have made that very clear to begin with. I am not an attorney. I was 16 points short of that in the California bar exam, so I'm not giving legal advice. This is not legal advice. I don't want anybody basing anything on that. But again, this is the conundrum. I think it's a debate that is worth having. And again, you could find, and that's the thing that happens in a freedom of speech case. If speech needed to be protected, it's like offensive speech is the kind of speech that's intended to be protected, because what things that we say that don't offend anybody, they don't need protection, because people would either just agree with it or they're not going to think anything about it. So why would you even need a cause of action for freedom of speech to begin with? And that's the other part of it. But again, it doesn't mean that when somebody does something, it's again, I have to make this clear. It's not the other side of it either. It's not, I got freedom of speech, I can say whatever I want, and you can't do anything. It's like, nope, that's not it either. So again, it's somewhere in the middle. It's like, but the important distinction to keep in mind is, there's two things in particular. The first one is, basically, if you're going to raise freedom of speech in some kind of context, it means, okay, well, the person that brought this up, I'm suffering consequences, but the person that brought this up, or the person that is inflicting punishment on me, they get brought in it too. It's not just that person's actions that are scrutinized. It's the consequences are scrutinized. The person that responds to it is also scrutinized. And that's where the protection comes in. So it's fascinating to me whenever this comes up. We've had this before. We had this discussion in during the whole Colin Kaepernick deal and taking a knee. I thought there was fascinating constitutional discussions in that, and this is another one too. And so again, I don't want this to be construed as, oh my gosh, he's completely innocent, he should be able to do whatever he wants, period. It's not that. It's just understanding that there's a little more nuance in there. And I know that nuance is something that social media does not do well. But that's the where it is. So, and I would be remiss, even though I'm not an attorney myself, to not bring some of that context out there. And there's way more to it. And this is back in like 2011 understanding of it too. So there's probably even new case law on it now that has complicated it even more than when I was studying it. But that's the essence of it here. So when you see somebody post like, oh, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences, or, oh, freedom of speech means whatever I can do, take both of those with a grain of salt, because both of those have elements of truth to them, but they're two opposing ends of the spectrum of the debate there. Neither of them are 100% the case. Neither of them are 100% false, but neither of them are 100% the real situation. So looking forward here on this and understanding the context of it, I think is important. So I hope I wasn't too far down the rabbit hole on that. That's pretty much all I have to say on the Gragson deal here. This does lead into the discussion of the Jimmie Johnson deal. So I want to go into that next. So the other big story from this past week, and I did do a video on this for those of you in the $10 level. I kind of posted my preliminary thoughts on this on the Patreon. I'm also looking to kind of create some more $10 level content for those of you in there. So definitely check that out on there if you're in the Patreon. But I said in that video that I was going to elaborate further on it here, especially if more news came up. Certainly didn't anticipate at the time that this Gragson story would kind of Bigfoot that, as it seems like it has the discussion here this week. But I do want to touch on it again here too. Much like the Gragson story, the Jimmie Johnson Hall of Fame not being unanimously voted in story is another kind of story that I don't like. And the reason for this is it's very similar to what happened in 2020. It's very similar to both the Kyle Larson story and what happened with Bubba Wallace at Talladega that year. And that is the story that inflicts the mob mentality. Now, I think there's a little bit of an aspect to this in the Gragson one, because I think there's some people out there that just don't like Gragson for one aspect, and I think they're letting that bias overcome a little bit of that there too. I mean, if there's other things that, that you don't agree with what he what he did or anything, that's a whole other discussion. But but with the Jimmie Johnson story, it's still, I don't want to, I'm trying to find the right word for it there. It's disappointing. It's disappointing that here's a moment that should just be a celebration. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, who cares that he wasn't voted in unanimously? Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame? He is a 7-time Cup Series champion. He got to compete again, he got to rival the win total of his hero, Cale Yarborough. The man is now a part team owner of the Legacy Motor Club. He is tremendously successful. Are any of those accomplishments, is the fact that he's not unanimously voted in, does it really do that much damage to his reputation? Especially when in the net effect of it is that he is still absolutely a first ballot Hall of Famer and does get in the Hall of Fame with his crew chief, who absolutely does deserve to get in, and himself was not voted in unanimously. That part needs to be kind of talked about a little bit more too. It's kind of presumed that the way that this story was pitched all week, it made it sound like Chad Knaus was voted in unanimously, but Jimmie wasn't, which is not true because Chad actually got fewer votes than Jimmie, which also raises interesting questions. It got very messy very quick. So at this point, it's like, okay, well, now we need to get the lists of all the people that voted for him. And now we need to figure out which 4 people on this list didn't vote for Jimmie Johnson. And then we need to make sure they're never on this panel again. And, because they don't know what they're talking about and they should never be there again and this and that. And the problem is, if it was as simple as maybe they shouldn't be back on the panel, or maybe they should have their panel eligibility reviewed, perhaps, like, okay, maybe consider that. But it's never just that, is it? I think that's the other concern. If it becomes something much more than that, that's the problem. It's like you're going to go out and get the person and what? Like, that's the problem. And again, both the Kyle Larson and the Bubba Wallace stories in 2020, these both reached that point. This one wasn't quite as white hot as those two were, because obviously there was another element to it that very much connects to the Noah Gragson one here that made that distinctive. But in this case here, it just, I don't like that kind of ugliness. And I know it's tempting to fall into that. And I know if you're a Jimmie Johnson fan and you're just supportive and you're really excited and you think, okay, this guy has to be, not only a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he has to be like, he has to completely, he has to be just completely voted in unanimously. I can't believe that anybody would vote for not just one person, but 2 people other than Jimmie Johnson on the list. And I think that's what most people had difficulty with, is the fact that it's a checklist here of, X number of names, and that for you to not vote for Jimmie Johnson, you would think that not only one person on that list should be in there before Jimmie, but that 2 people do. I think that's where people have some difficulty with it. And maybe the same reason that people don't have as much difficulty with Chad getting even fewer votes and also not being unanimously voted in. But I think it just gets so ugly. And I have a real distaste for that, because that's social media at its worst. That's the mob mentality culture at its worst. And it's hard to resist that. I understand. Passions run deep. I think there's a lot of understanding with Jimmie Johnson's career. And I think a lot of this builds from the way his career went itself. Both the fact that he accomplished what he accomplished was massive. I mean, I know that we could split hairs about the playoff system, or, the way the car was designed, or what Chad Knaus did, or what he got away with, or anything, what Chad got away with in technical inspection, or anything like that. But the man still performed. The man still won the championship. Whatever they set in front of him, he did it. And he did it in multiple different cars, mind you. He did it in the old Gen 4 car. He did it in the car of tomorrow. He did it in the Gen 6. He did it against different groups of drivers, including his teammates, other drivers that were having career years, including Mark Martin in 2009 or Carl Edwards in 2008, who in any other circumstance or Jeff Gordon in '07. That would have very easily been the champion. For him to prevail in those circumstances is something absolutely remarkable. But you're always going to have people, but I think there's always been that little bit of an edge to discussing Jimmie Johnson in a historical context, that there's always a perception that he didn't get as much credit or as much attention, or he wasn't celebrated as much as he should have been for his accomplishments. And I know that this taps into that. I understand that. Okay. I will freely admit, I was not the biggest Jimmie Johnson fan when he was out there and dominating all those years. I mean, dominance of any kind is not something that's typically celebrated. When Jeff Gordon was crushing the field under his heel with 13 wins in 1998, he was booed constantly. But nobody is going to say that, he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And he wasn't voted in unanimously. So I get that what I'm saying with this is that I understand that there's a reason that people are upset. I don't believe that people are upset for no reason. I just think that they're threatening to turn it into something ugly that is going to kind of stain what he's accomplished. It's going to create the very same thing that they probably feel led to this here, which is Jimmie not getting enough credit for his accomplishments. And it threatens to distract from it. And, I'm glad the story has kind of gone away. I actually had to kind of remind myself, because the Gragson thing has been such a firestorm this week. But that's kind of the situation. So I understand it, and if Jimmie himself is personally upset that he didn't get voted in unanimously, I think that would hold way more credence. Because I'm hearing all these other people that are saying, oh, it's terrible, he didn't get voted in, it's terrible, he didn't get all the votes. It's like, for me personally, I only care if Jimmie cares. If Jimmie cares, if Jimmie was highly offended by this, that he's like, oh, 4 people didn't vote me in. It's like, when you get a group of people in a room, can you get them to agree on anything? I mean, if you brought in a group of people to say, like, if Richard Petty is like the greatest driver ever, you're not going to get everybody to agree. You're going to get people that are Bobby Allison fans. You're going to get people that are Darrell Waltrip fans. You're going to get people that are Dale Earnhardt fans. Greatness is something that's, it's hard to compare it. It's hard to compare eras. And that was another reason I think that maybe Jimmie didn't get as much as attention as he deserved, which is a worthy concern to bring up, which it is worthy to bring up. But that's kind of where I am with that. And the other part of it too, similar to what happened at Talladega in 2020, the aspect where it's like, we got to find these 4 people, that should start making your ears burn a little bit. Because doesn't that sound a little bit familiar, where it's like, okay, well, we found something next to Bubba Wallace's car, and now we need to go find who did this. But keeping in mind that this was in the Talladega case, and again, I think this story deserves a deep dive in its own right. I think, but that's a story for another day. But the fact that this was during COVID, when fans weren't allowed in the garage area, so nobody could have done that there, when media wasn't allowed in the garage area, when even the drivers really weren't in the garage area. So the only people that, suppose that happened, suppose the garage pole thing here happened during that weekend, it would have impugned the medical staff that was allowed in the infield, the crew members that were allowed in the infield, and high-ranking NASCAR officials that are granted that access. Very, very few people were in there, because those are the only people that would have had the opportunity to do that. And I bring that up in this context, and I'm not bringing this up to try to open old wounds at all. What I'm saying is there's a trend here, in a social media trend that I dislike. And in this one here was very much the same. It's like, we need to find out who did this. Well, keep in mind who you were impugning in the Jimmie Johnson situation. The ballot group that determines who's in the Hall of Fame, it's just like who had access to the Talladega infield in June of 2020. It's not just everybody. It's not just, oh, it was some terrible person that messed this up. These are past Hall of Fame inductees. These are highly respected members of the media. These are OEM representatives. These are high-ranking people in NASCAR. If we ever do find out who these 4 people are, it might surprise you. I don't think we ever will, really. Because I think whoever the first person is that comes out is going to get I mentioned this in the thing on Wednesday, is going to get a disproportionate amount of the blame. Is going to get way too much of it, and people are going to throw everything at it. And I would hate for that to happen, especially on Jimmie Johnson's behalf, because also that would also put Jimmie Johnson in an uncomfortable position, or maybe he would have to say something that says, okay, well, maybe this has gone too far. Don't do this. But see, that's the situation, folks. It's not like they brought in 54 people or 53 people there that or who you would expect in there, and then 4 people, that were just don't belong or anything like that. I don't think you could suss it. I've been looking at that list, and it's like, you may have some people that maybe you don't agree with, or maybe you don't like the stuff they write, or maybe, it's this or that or whatever. But really kind of looking at the group, I was thinking, look, if you can get all but 4 of these people to agree that you should be in the Hall of Fame, I think that's pretty awesome. No presidential candidate is 100% of the vote. I mean, it just doesn't happen. You're going to have people that are just not going to agree. And I'm not aware enough about the history of baseball Hall of Fame or the football Hall of Fame. People have been making comparisons to that. I can't comment on that, so I'm not going to go down that road. Other people can talk about that and bring that up. But I think in this context, I would just be wary of the mob mentality, because it creeps up quick and it happens fast. And in the social media era, it happens so fast. And to the point where people start making plans about like what's going to happen next. Like, oh, we should get these people off this panel and everything. I think the important thing to bring up, unless Jimmie Johnson speaks out, if Jimmie Johnson speaks out, it's his party, man. It's his party. I think that's the only person that should matter. Just like in the Talladega thing, it's Bubba Wallace on that one there. If it's a problem to him, it should be a problem to everybody. And that's kind of the way I look at it. We have too many people that get offended on other people's behalf, and that's another problem for another show that I'm sure nobody wants to hear. So there's that. But that's the situation. So just be careful, because I think we should have learned from what happened in 2020. We should have learned that, even before, from what happened there, that, you need to be careful who you're implicating in a pursuit of something. It may seem like you're on the right side of it, and you're gonna suss this out, and it's gonna make things better. But just be careful what you are in position to lose, because that could be a real problem, and he may end up with an even bigger problem that again distracts from something that again should be a positive. And that's the important thing. So at the end of this thing here, I want to say again, Jimmie Johnson, congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame. Chad Knaus, same thing. Tremendous. Deserving people that should be in there, as much as I didn't like when Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus got in there. And that's one more thing I want to kind of bring up here. And I don't know if the numbers line up on this here too, because I mentioned this on Wednesday's deal there too. Consider, if you will, somebody that voted for Chad and not Jimmie. Would you have as much of a problem with a person in that context? If you're really that upset about Jimmie Johnson not being unanimous in voting in, consider somebody that would have voted in Chad Knaus, but not Jimmie Johnson. It could be argued, again, the accomplishments of the crew chief versus the accomplishments of the driver. The drivers are, of course, the stars of the sport, not pretending that they aren't. But consider somebody did that. Would you be as upset if it turned out that any number of the people that didn't vote for Jimmie voted for Chad instead? I mean, you never know. You could have people that voted for Jimmie that didn't vote for Chad. And again, I'd have to pencil it out to see how the numbers would work out there. I think it would pretty much just narrow down to just those 4 people there. But that's the other part of it. Even if that didn't happen, consider if that had happened and maybe somebody credited that dominance of the championship to Chad Knaus and not Jimmie Johnson. Would they be wrong for saying so? I mean, he's a 7-time champion crew chief. We got Dale Inman in there with his championships. But again, that's just putting that out there at the same time there too, because again, at the end of the day, Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus are in the Hall of Fame, as well they should be, and it's also overshadowed Donnie Allison getting in there too. I'm glad that all we almost have all of the Alabama gang in there. We need to get Neil Bonded in there, and that'll be great. And he'll have his time. That's the other thing, too. The other people on the list, they will have their time. But, you know, and again, I think it would be nice if it was in a situation where more of these people could enjoy it while they're still with us, because we're losing them by the day. I mean, even a lot of the drivers and teams I write about, you know, we lost Buddy Arrington and we lost Mike Potter last year, and, you know, and Trevor Boys this year. You know, the time only goes one direction. And I know it never seems like there's enough praise that's given to a certain person. But you just got to do the best you can in the time that's out there. And I think, you know, and it's a difficult situation. I know there are other people that pointed out it's hard when you get somebody that's a first ballot person and you just know that they're going to get voted in, like if it's a Dale Jr. or, you know, or a Jimmie Johnson or something like that. And then you know that anybody else in there it's going to be that much harder for them to get in. And you'd hope that they all do get in, you know, but a lot of that was said a long time ago, and we're all just kind of working our way through it. So, yeah, so that's kind of where I am with that. I feel like I shouldn't go too much further down that road. So, yeah, so I think that's all I really want to kind of say on the Jimmie Johnson thing and the Noah Gragson thing. If you're still watching, oh, good, we still have 40 viewers. Okay, I don't know if we gained more or lost more during that. I know we went pretty far afield here. But yeah, that's kind of on that. So if you have any other questions on any of that, or if anything I said seemed confusing or whatever, feel free to mention in the chat. I'll try to cover that as best as possible here. But now to kind of transition out of that, let's talk about the Xfinity Series race, and we'll talk about the Mike Harmon situation this weekend too. I want to kind of jump into all of that at the same time. So here's the situation here. So we got let me get the mouse. Oh yeah, that's right. This mouse isn't working. Alrighty. So talking about the situation with Mike Harmon this week. A lot of you are probably kind of curious about what was posted earlier this week when I had the tweet talking about a team that was lacking a sponsor for the Xfinity Series race. But you know, and again, I want to say this too here at the same time. You know, and again, much like you know, again, I don't usually have shows like this. I know I said I'd move on here, but I'm seeing some of the comments here at the same time too. So again, you disagree with me on this, that's totally cool. I don't expect you to agree with me 100% of the time either. I think it's good that there's a debate on all these topics here at the same time. So again, you know, whether it's about the Jimmie Johnson one or the Noah Gragson one, again, all I know is my own views on this. If you disagree with it, I got no problem with that. We'll talk about it, and I'd love, you know, hear your position. I don't intend for this to be a lecture. At the same time either. I know it feels like it here on this, but that's the thing, you know, and heck, I'm wrong about plenty of things too. Other things come to light and we find out other things that can always change things too. So no problems there. Okay. You know, no worries. You know, and again, I hope I haven't upset people too much on here. But look, folks, like I really don't want to worry too much about that either, because I think that would be an inferior show for you guys. I try to be as clear as possible and as straightforward as possible, and I try to just tell you what I'm thinking. I don't want to put on a character on this show here. So, and again, if it's something you disagree with, I am totally cool talking it out, and you know, and things of that nature there too. So I hope that comes across, because you know, yeah, I pop off on a lot of things on this show. But you know, and again, not saying that, you know, yeah, there's anything else that, you know, that doesn't fit in this here, you know, either. So, yeah, but again, I believe just give the benefit of the doubt on that. But, again, I hope I haven't upset people too much on it. I haven't really been reading the chat here on this, but you know, we'll see. So, yeah, so there's other situations, other deals with that. So I don't want, I'm going too far down that road. Anyway, so the Mike Harmon situation. This was kind of an interesting deal here, and I know it kind of confused people how I phrased it on social media here. Here we go again, social media. So talking about the Mike Harmon deal. So I got a call, I believe it was on Thursday night, from a friend of mine. I don't know if he wants me to disclose who he was, but for the sake of this, I'll leave that out. But he was basically with Mike Harmon, and they were talking about it, and they were saying, like, look, Mike Harmon had a sponsor that backed out, and they were in a situation where they couldn't afford tires to go qualify. They felt like they had a good car. Dawson Cram was getting ready to go. They hadn't made a race in a while. They hadn't made a race in Charlotte. I mean, them and Motorsports Business Management have had a ton of DNQs this year, and it's been a difficult situation for them. You had a situation there with him, and basically was saying, look, do you know anybody that could jump on as a sponsor? And it's like, well, I really don't. The sponsors I've done with Brad Perez, that's really not enough to really kind of make it affect on a tire budget, which is like thousands of dollars. That's not what I'm capable of producing. So I was talking with this guy who had Harmon there, and I was talking with Harmon as well. And I said, well, look, we can't do like, a crowdfunding thing or anything like that. That's not going to work out. Let me just put a message out there and see if anybody's interested. And Mike asked that I not mention that it was his team in the post. So I know it was confusing that it said like, oh, here's a team in the field that doesn't have a sponsor, couldn't afford tires. You could probably glean from the post that it was going to be an underfunded team. So it was going to be one of the teams that we've usually talked about on the website here, one way or the other. And I think that's the situation. In bringing that up there, so we kind of talked it over there a bit, and I said, oh, look, I'll put some feelers out. I sometimes forget how many people follow the Twitter feed. I mean, and again, big thanks to you guys. I mean, we're past 8,000 on there. That's tremendous. So big thanks to you guys there for your support on that. And that made this work better than I thought it would, which is great. He said basically, look, Mike doesn't really do all the social media and all that. Can you do this? And if I hadn't heard from Mike directly, I wouldn't have done it, because I believe me, I've been in situations there where people turn out to not be on the up and up when they try to set this up. But I was literally talking to Mike, and so at that point I was like, okay, let's see if we can make something happen here. We'll do that. So I put the post out there saying that a team had a sponsor back out. They're looking for anybody that's interested. Anybody that sent me a direct message, I'd get them in touch with Mike, send their number to Mike, and then they call and they go from there. So that was the situation. And I did talk with, I believe, about a half dozen people. We had about 6 people get back to me. I believe 2 got to the point there with numbers, and I sent those over to Mike, and Mike spoke to both of them. And one of those worked out for this weekend, which is why they were able to qualify this weekend. So a little bit behind the scenes there. So I'm glad they had a good run. They were able to qualify for the race, which was huge. Being able to run out there. This is something I don't anticipate is going to be a regular thing through the site. It's not really my focus. There's other sites out there that try to match sponsors up with teams and everything. But the person that originally called me about this is a good friend, a good supporter of the site. I wanted to do him a solid here, and I hope people are cool with that, because, again, I know that it's tricky in that sense there, but, and again, I hope people aren't upset about that either. But there's I can't do anything about it if people are. So there's that aspect too. But I'm glad to have helped him out a little bit. He offered to put the last car logo on the car. He wasn't able to get it on there at the time. But I'm glad they made the show and things worked out that way. And they had a decent run. I mean, they overcame some problems there. Had some issues with, I believe they had oil on the rear glass of the car at one point. But to get a decent finish out there was huge. So that was kind of the story with that one there too. So that's another one to kind of look at. Your last place battle in that one thankfully did not involve him. That was involved in a very early accident. Sammy Smith involved in a wreck on the back straightaway where he was veered into the number 77 car of Carson Hocevar, ripped out the exhaust pipes of the number 77 car, and somehow the Spire Motorsports team was able to send him back out there and have a good run out there. So again, kudos to that team, even though they ended up finishing back in the 32nd spot, not the kind of day that they wanted, but undoubtedly a good finish, a good recovery for them. Not a good finish, but a good recovery for them. Sammy Smith, unfortunately, the front of that car was just destroyed, reminiscent of his other last place run at Daytona last year. But that was kind of the situation there. But still, Sammy Smith being your last place finisher in that after completing 11 laps in this circumstance here. So unfortunately, a short afternoon for one of the rookie drivers out there. Mason Maggio was got some damage in that, although the team didn't seem to indicate that at the moment. Sent him back out there. Unfortunately, a flat right front tire sent him into the outside wall and finished in the 37th position. Connor Mosack involved in a crash there, tangled with, I believe it was Kyle Sieg or Joe Graff Jr., one of the RSS cars, into turn number 1, bounced off the wall with both ends of the car, finished in the 36th spot. Kyle Weatherman had a battery issue, which is too bad because apparently, according to Weatherman, they had a pretty good piece under him for the Mario Gosselin team. The number 91, unfortunately, finished in the 35th spot, the last car to fall out, finishing in that spot. And then Patrick Emmerling rounding out the bottom 5 after a late race caution when his car bounced off the outside wall, forcing a late race restart there at the same time. Dawson Cram, mentioning him there with the Mark Harmon team, a 28th place finish for him. And 2 spots ahead of him, the other underdog effort here that has also had double-digit DNQs this year with the Sage Karam effort there at Motorsports Business Management. Great effort for him in the 25th spot there, so kudos to him on that, even leading a lap during the late stages of the multiple green flag stops there at the end of that. Kudos to Karam, who, again, turned heads there with 2 completely different teams in consecutive weeks after going so close to winning at Road America. Comes out at Michigan able to lead a lap in a team that has been struggling all season long, both with starts and even finishing races under power. So good for them as well. Hopefully that helps out that team as well. They actually had tires at the end of their race too, which is great, especially given the limited backing they had with their returning sponsor and Crash Claims R Us from their team supporter there as well. But Sage Karam in the 25th spot there. Congratulations to Ryan Ellis. I think we talked about this last week's show. Ryan Ellis getting the full-time deal with the Alpha Prime Racing team, so good effort for him. Tremendous effort at that as well. Now, the initial incident that triggered the accident that eliminated Sammy Smith did involve the other 2 Joe Gibbs Racing entries, both Ty Gibbs and John Hunter Nemechek. They recovered to both finish 1st and 4th in the race. A tremendous recovery there. Ty Gibbs in the 4th spot. None too happy with John Hunter Nemechek, who got in the back of him. It looked like Smith might have got in the back of Nemechek. Things just stacked up a little bit in turn 3. It was hard to tell. But it's kind of an interesting situation that happened there. And John Hunter Nemechek pulls off another victory here. This was another kind of interesting aspect this weekend. It's certainly on the social media side here. That again, I do feel that John Hunter Nemechek is kind of, you talk about a driver, we were talking about Jimmie Johnson earlier, talking about a driver that didn't really get as much attention or just didn't get as much interest in here. That's, I think, the situation there. I think that with John Hunter, I think that even though he did have that difficult season in the Cup Series, I'm not going to pretend that was, an impressive season. He had that one race at Talladega where he was right up there with Ryan Blaney and in the mix and trying to get a good finish. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out for him there. But again, the reason I constantly think about it is every one of these Xfinity races I watch, it seems like the broadcast is always focusing on Cole Custer and Justin Allgaier. And I know they're both extremely talented drivers, both with Cup experience, like John Hunter Nemechek. But it seems like they get a lot more credit for getting good performances out there and racking up victories. So yeah, I think that's another part of it. But yeah, I think that's another aspect of that at the same time. As to the John Hunter Nemechek finish there, again, great run for him. Another Xfinity Series victory for him. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if he makes the championship 4. But I know that he stepped on a lot of toes. I know there's a lot of people. We had a great debate about this, great discussion about it. And I was really asking, it's like, look, I mean, what's it going to take for people to take him seriously a championship contender? And obviously, there's a history of some very over-aggressive driving. The Mo Sport clip with him and Cole Custer certainly comes to mind. I mean, that was certainly over the top. You think about times that he came close and didn't pull off a championship in the Truck Series. You could be critical of that for one reason or another. I think it was when he was driving for his father's team in Nemco Motorsports and capitalizing on a lot of runs where they didn't have full sponsorship. That's one thing. And then if it's just generally just his mannerisms or how he acts with fans, I can't really comment on that. I haven't really spoken to him. And in fact, as I mentioned before, he has blocked me on Twitter, or X. I don't know. I'm still going to call it Twitter, but, John Hunter Nemechek, again, I think regardless of that, I mean, NASCAR has a decent enough history of drivers that maybe weren't fan favorites or weren't the most popular driver out there in general, but they get the job done. And I know one could think one way or the other that if you get in a Joe Gibbs entry in the Xfinity Series, you're going to be a favorite to compete for the win. I certainly am outspoken as anybody about, Cup drivers getting down there. Certainly guys like Kyle Busch and others. Kyle Busch within the context of Joe Gibbs or Kyle Larson in the Hendrick context. But again, I think he's really interesting to watch, and I think he's going to be an interesting story coming down to the rest of the season. So that's another part at the same time too. So I think it was a tremendous run. I think it was impressive that he came back from the spin at the very beginning of the race to run as well as he did. I think it's another part of that too. Also, congratulations to Jordan Anderson Racing in the 9th and 10th spots with Parker Retzlaff and Jeb Burton. I think that's a great finish there for both 9th and 10th spots there at the same time. I think that's tremendous too. So great runs there. I'm sorry. I have this itch. I've itched this in the back of my mind. It occurs to me and I don't want to backtrack on this. I want to make sure that I expressed myself clearly in this one earlier because I feel like I didn't say it the best way here. So when I bring up Talladega in 2020, and again, I know that's a contentious issue and certainly no different from, anything else from this last week. I was talking again more about the mob mentality in who you're impugning in the garage area. I'm talking about that in the context of the media response, the media that, the social media and that response and jumping on that. And, and again, knowing that whoever was going to, be the result of that was whoever had access to the garage area. I'm not talking about Bubba Wallace's own perception of that. Because again, much like with Jimmie Johnson, it's, that's the one that matters the most. It's and obviously we know from that event, we certainly got his standpoint on that. So just again, to be clear on that one. But again, I probably already stepped in a landmine on that one, but that's where I'm coming from on that. It's again, just with a story there where it just gets out of control really quick. That's kind of that part of it I'm kind of addressing there too. Don't know if that makes it any much clearer, but hopefully it does. I just saw a couple comments up there that kind of reminded me of that there too. But again, not a one-to-one comparison, but more in the response to it rather than the event itself. I think there's definitely degrees of separation there and how those happen. And it's certainly in the level of the response too. But anyway, let's see here. So, I think that's about all I have on the Xfinity race there too. Pretty open and shut, pretty decent competition. Certainly its share of accidents too. Not as competitive, I would say, as a Cup Series race, but yeah, I think another kind of way to look at that at the same time. But again, I'm feeling very positive about this weekend in general from the Michigan weekend. I think we had some pretty good, pretty good competition, and we saw some rallies from the back of the field. Actually, somebody was mentioning we almost had the was it the 20 car sweep the weekend with Christopher Bell kind of rallying through the field there, and John Hunter Nemechek, winning the race there in the Xfinity Series deal. I don't know. It's almost happened, but didn't quite shake out there too. I think Jeff Bodine's the biggest omission. That would be kind of interesting. Yes, we are going to do trivia. Absolutely. Gosh, for any of you that stuck around in this show here, you definitely have earned trivia for tonight. So yeah. Austin Foster, yeah, in regards to Noah, should he have done it? No. Should he have been suspended? Probably indefinitely? No. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that could be, I think most people can agree with that too. But yeah. Too serious. Let's talk about racing again. Yeah, no, I do apologize. That was that was kind of a full show here. But again, I feel compelled to bring it up on that. But yeah, that's why I wanted to do the cup discussion beforehand there too. So we'll kind of get that through. Already picked your category. Uh-oh. Well, we better jump into it then. Alrighty. So, let's see here. But this is the thing, just, again, I think that, I always crack a smile when I see these ads for these shows where it's like, these shows where guys just pop off on sports and it's like, oh, they're this larger in life personality. You got Skip Bayless and you got like the other guy, oh God, not Shannon Sharp on his show, but I mean the other guy, the other one. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. But I mean, like, it's to have the confidence to just kind of say like any topic on that or just kind of jump into it. I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. I'd like to be more bold in just saying, discussing things on that. But I mean, it's tricky. The social media aspect is challenging because there, obviously there's always going to be topics that are going to be harder to talk about. And then of course, he's going to want them on this show. Gosh, remember that one where we were talking about stuff in the news and then Chris Buescher just occurred to me. That was a Chris Buescher one too. He just got disqualified at Daytona and then I ended the show and it's like, oh crap. Like, that should jump back into it. But again, this is the balance, in shows like this, when you have a couple stories like this and it involves NASCAR, I'm going to lean into it. If there's anything all I can add into it, I'll try to discuss it on here. And again, you don't have to agree on it at all. And again, so again, but it is, I don't know. I almost said it is what it is, but I guess it kind of is. So, yeah, but at any rate, it's all part of it. I mean, I'm sure, knowing me, I'm sure there's something, from other like shows or something like that, people don't agree on or something like that. But, I don't know, but it's all, it's all part of it. But again, that's where we are. What am I talking about? Let me just jump into trivia. Let's do this. How about we do that? Here we go, folks. So we're bringing out the late 90s deal here again. We got our categories: NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Maybe in the future, I'll save the serious stuff to like the end of the show. If they're like one of the real hangers on, that would probably be better. Yeah, maybe that would be better. I thought it would be better to kind of space it out because I didn't want to end on that. I think I did that on a show before and I ended on it. And I think that was just kind of a bummer. So I don't know. You could leave your comments in the chat here at the same time. So yeah. Willie B. Yeah, there you go. So again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and mention in the chat which one you like, and we'll do some questions from that to wrap up the show. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I didn't think we'd have much of anybody come into the show tonight with the Michigan race being not only postponed, but then this hours afterwards here. But hopefully you guys enjoy it here. All right, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So, while you guys pick your categories here, I want to kind of mention a couple things here. I'm very excited about the next video that's coming up to the channel, and luckily, because of this postponement, because the race got pushed yesterday, I was just able to finish a first draft of the next video. And this is the biography of Chuck Bown. So don't worry, folks. We got much more NASCAR content on here on the way. This one I'm very excited about. It's a story I've been meaning to do more of a deep dive on. Brian Hallman at the BRH Racing Archives was tremendously helpful on that. I think that's another part of it there. I think it's going to be a really good video. I was just watching it part. There's a couple things I need to fix on it. but I'm hoping to get that re-rendered tonight. I don't think it'll take too long. Hopefully by tomorrow, those of you that are in the $5 and up levels of the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock, you should have advanced access to this video. It is just over 1 hour in length. I believe it's going to be about 1 hour, 5 minutes when it's done. So plenty of content there. It's going to be a very entertaining video here for you to check out. And again, another kind of fresh look at another driver out there that I think doesn't get talked about that much. And again, perhaps even in a future Hall of Fame discussion, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to talk about. I hope this video makes a good case for that, but we'll certainly find out from there. So the plan is to have that available for those of you, the Patreon $5 level and up starting tomorrow. And then next week it will go public. In the meantime, I'm working on getting other videos set up here, including the script recorded for another episode further down the line. And then we'll get that going here. And yeah, hopefully get closer to more regular uploads on here and not just these streams. And I'm hoping that's going to be something else that is going to help looking forward here too. So yeah, I think that's another another part to look at here at the same time. But yeah, we're going to get some more content up here, and I think it's going to be good. I'm still looking. The frustrating thing is, this was another video that I thought was going to be a short form one. I thought for sure this was only going to be like a 15-minute video. And I'm like, great, this will probably take a lot less time to edit. And then I was like, well, then I found this stuff, and I found that stuff, and I found a little bit more, and which I think is great. I think it still moves along decently. But yeah, it's going to be a longer video. I'm almost planning on just kind of leaning into that and that having that just be what I do on the channel here too, just doing some longer videos. I'd like to be able to produce them quicker. I've thought about hiring an editor. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much time that would really save. And I like being really hands-on with it. I've learned to kind of really enjoy that process and try to improve on it, really. I mean, I listened to some of my older videos and I'm like talking too fast, or I'm mumbling over words, or the volume balance is out of whack. It's like, well, I hope I've learned a few things here along the way to make it a little bit more of an enjoyable listening experience. At least I hope I have. And I certainly like to keep doing that there. So, but yeah, I think that's kind of where we're heading. I mean, certainly the next couple of videos I'm working on, I think they're gonna at least, I mean, next 500 days, the next field fillers, they're gonna at least be 1 hour long. And this other standalone video I just started outlining, 45 minutes, maybe on that. I mean, it makes for a pretty long recording day, but very enjoyable though. I mean, I really enjoy the writing process of it, but I'm so glad there's this video element to be able to post it and share pictures of it. And again, Brian Hallman, he has done tremendous work behind the scenes. I mean, really, with him and the BRH Racing Archives and what he's been able to bring to bear. You'll see it in this Chuck Bound video in particular. He found some absolutely, like, just my jaw hit the floor, like stuff that I hadn't seen before. In a driver that I had a casual interest in following his career when I was younger. And again, I hope it's going to come out pretty well there on that too. Oh, yep, there you go. No tires, just gas. Yeah, so that's what's good too. Oh, Jay Fendi. Okay, cool. I'm glad you like the stream. Again, you know, if I got some of you guys yelling at your radio, look, it is what it is. I don't want to apologize, but it's just yeah. This right here, I'll tell you this. That right there, that's the reason I'm not an attorney. I'll tell you what. Because, like, you know, Lastbro, he doesn't lose a debate. Like, that's the thing. That's why I celebrate so much when I actually pick a winning driver instead of him, because it doesn't happen too often. Yeah, it's harder. You see, I don't usually do too many opinion pieces on my site. I've got to really have something in my mouth if I'm going to do an opinion piece. Like, it's usually, I got to grind that thing out like, you know, like it's a pepper grinder there. But yeah, but other people can just debate effortlessly. But I don't know. Anyway, let's get into some questions. How about we do that? Where are we with this? Wild card tracks. Okay, wow, wild card. All right, let's do that. I don't think we've done wild card in a while. Let's see here. Here we go. First question, folks. What prompted the use of extra security at tracks during the 1991 season. Hey, we do have another headlines crossing into NASCAR thing, so we have that too. What prompted the use of extra security at tracks during the 1991 season? Got a nickname there. No tires, just yes. Yeah, no. Van Giesenbergen. I'm trying to lengthen the Gie in there. Van Giesbergen. I find that a little bit easier. I mean, the thing that I think I said this on the Chicago show, but it's like when they started saying SVG, it's like his first name's Shane. There's no other Shanes in the field. If he just said Shane, people would. I don't think people would be thrown off that much. I know traditionally it seems like in broadcasting you would say their last name. I mean, unless it's, I guess, something completely unique, but I don't know. What prompted the use of extra security at tracks during the 1991 season is the question. Yeah, that's right. We got Truex is re-upped. Congratulations to him. That's another one. What prompted the use of extra security at tracks during the 91 season? And the answer, is indeed Operation Desert Storm, a.k.a. The War of the Persian Gulf. Lottie got that. RD Fox 76. Blake Thiemann, yep, you got it first too. You got War, good, yep, there you go, that counts. Gulf War, Desert Storm, yep, correct. Other good guesses though. Alien Invasion, Fans Climbing the Fence, Threats Towards Earnhardt, yeah, any numbers there. Aussies just call him SVG. Okay, cool. I didn't know that, Amy. I was wondering how much of that was just here. I mean, I saw the logo on the car, but that's cool. Shane Van Giesbergen's just a fun name to say. Let's get another question here. Oh, that one's too easy. No, I think we did. Oh, gosh. I think some of these we've done before. Here we go. How about this one? What NASCAR Winston Cup driver was born in Calera, Alabama? What NASCAR Winston Cup driver was born in Calera, Alabama? Oh gosh, in this entire debate, I didn't even talk about that lame broadcast for the ARCA race this weekend. Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much said everything I wanted to say on that, but I mean, this is another one. Okay, well, I'm going to have to go into the social media aspect of this again, too. I get it. And a lot of people responded to this saying this. I get that they're doing it remotely, okay? But doing it remotely is not an excuse to do a play-by-play that badly. I'm sorry. I really can't abide that. Because, look, there's Formula One races, what Bob Varsha and stuff did. They would do those remotely. And they're fantastic. It's like they're there. They're capturing what's happening perfectly. And it's like, oh, well, it's just an ARCA race. Oh, it's just with 22 to go. It's like the leaders are wrecking each other. When the leaders are wrecking each other, you better get on the horn and say something. Don't just clam up and start laughing. Like, I mean, what? Like, that was insane. No, I thought that was terrible. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver was born in Calera, Alabama is the question. Calera, Alabama. Russ Wheeler, Hut Strickland, Kit Pardue from Driven, Ooh and E. No tires, you're just going back into the memes. The other memes. Bobby Allison. Let's see. Got several. Calera, Alabama is a Calera, Alabama. I assume that's the pronunciation. I could be butchering that completely here on the West Coast. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver was born in Calera, Alabama? Alrighty, and the answer is indeed Hut Strickland. I was starting to think it was Steve Grissom, but Hut Strickland is the correct answer. Drew H, looks like you were the first one on that. Amy Cothran, you got it as well. 611 Hornet. No tires, just gas. Willie B. All right. Let's see what else we got here. This is a good one. Who was the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? Who is the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? Who is the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? Joe, you never crawl. Yeah, there you go. Who is the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? We got guesses for Dale Earnhardt, Bill Elliott, David Pearson, Richard Petty, Lee Petty, Jeff Gordon, Fireball Robert. Oh, we got a good spread of guesses here. This is fantastic. Who was the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? Ooh, David Hobbs. There you go. Yeah, David Hobbs. Yeah, it's a good point. I was just reading your comment there, Jonathan. Thank you. I was actually just watching the one of the videos NASCAR Man posted of the first IROC race at Riverside. I love that, like, midway through, like, there's just music playing. Like, instead of play-by-play, like, the race starts and then there's like some Chuck Mangione going on there, and it's bopping. I basically just played that on the drive home today, so that was pretty good. Definitely check out NASCAR Man History's channel. He's posted not only his content, including his excellent Davey Allison video, but also some classic races on there as well. So definitely pull that up. Who was the first driver to win events on 6 different superspeedways? Alrighty. 6 different superspeedways. The answer is David Pearson. Drew H., you got it, man. Amy, you got it as well. David Pearson is the correct answer. That makes sense, especially since I guess Pearson did that part-time schedule for so long, usually running the faster tracks. But it's still surprising that Richard Petty didn't beat him. Can't imagine me playing the banjo. Yeah, probably not. Played the trombone. That was my instrument back in high school. Actually, interesting fact. I probably mentioned this before. It's gonna sound like I'm name dropping, but I swear this is true. Any of you guys know Kevin Pereira? You guys watch Attack of the Show, G4 TV. He's up to he's doing some other stuff now, but he's like big on social media. Anybody ever heard of him? I played in the band with him. He was our drummer from middle school through high school here in the back in the Bay Area, back when I lived out there. And I was the lead trombonist. And yeah, we played in the same band together. So that was a fun time. So if you do a 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon thing, it probably jumps through that connection, I guess, on that. But yeah, it was always really funny back then too. The way I think he had a website in the this is like pre YouTube days. I'm talking like late 90s kind of stuff there, but he used to do sketches and stuff for our daily news show that we had in high school. We was in Deer Valley High School, so it was DVTV, and he always did like the segments on that. He was he would fit in perfectly with like a lot of the YouTube stuff these days. But yeah, he and I went to the same schools, middle school through high school. And we both played in the band. I haven't met him. I haven't seen him in years. Last time I saw him, we were at senior night at Disneyland in June of 2001. I want to say. I think they still had the I think that for those of you that are Defunct Land fans, they still had the Superstar limo ride at the California Experience. If that puts you in perspective, there we still had that back then. That was pretty crazy. So yeah, so there was that one too. Hey, R.D. Fox, you played trombone too. Awesome. There you go. All right. Okay. Ooh, here's a good question. This is a good question. Next one here. What tire changer got to drive in a Featherlight race in 1997? There's a good one. What tire changer got to drive in a Featherlight race in 1997? Oh, okay. People who saw the Superstar Limo video. Good. I'm glad people like Defunctland. He does incredible content, doesn't he? Just, I mean, I would love to get even a fraction close to where he is on his stuff. It's so well produced. I mean, you guys are really supportive of my stuff and the stuff that NASCAR Man does, and we do a good job. But there's so much, like, people have really upped the ante in especially the documentary game on YouTube, and I'd love to kind of get to that level, but man, I mean, it's incredible. Have you seen the video that he did on Lines? That one's fantastic. I've probably watched that like 3 times, and it's like a 2-hour video, but it's captivating. It's so well made. My God, he puts so much into it. Incredible. No, we stand Defunct Land, and Yesterworld Entertainment's quite good too, but especially Defunct Land, just incredible content. Really shows like commitment to the source material for sure. Let me read it again. What tire changer got to drive in a Featherlight race in 1997? That is a question. Ooh, good guesses we got. I forgot I'm wearing the Shelmerdine shirt. There's one chance. Chad Knaus, Andy Petrie, Chocolate Myers. Tire changer on the 30 car, Buckshot Jones says. Oh, the big red car video. Oh, man, that was so good. I didn't realize there was so much lore to, what was it, the Wiggles? Oh, my God. Incredible video. Incredible. It's such an art form. I mean, it really is more than just reciting the facts and having mastery over the material. I mean, if you can make it that engaging, just love his stuff. Well, what tire changer got to drive in a Featherlight race in 1997? We'll get the answer here pretty soon. Yeah, two. Yeah, there you go. That's the one. There we go. Right on. What tire changer got to drive in a Featherlight race in 1997? The answer is Tom Hubert. Tom Hubert. In fact, he got to, I believe, in the race they're talking about, I think that was the one where he drove Jim Wilson's car at Sears Point in the Cup race. Because Tom Hubert, famously, in NASCAR circles, 3 straight last place finishes at Sears Point, 2004, 2005, 2006, all of them driving for, left to right, Kirk Shelmerdine. There you go. So there you go. Tom Hubert is the correct answer. I don't think anybody got that. Although, I think you might be right, though. Buckshot Jones, I think you got it right, because I think he was the tire changer for Benson. Oh, by the way, yeah, great job by Benson in the SRX race this week. It was cool seeing him run the fast white car again on the scheme. I did notice that, and I appreciate people spreading the word about it. Hopefully the video got more traction there during that this week. I think it did. I think more people that wanted to learn the history of Benson in that very unusual 2000 season. There's actually going to be a bit of crossover with that video in the Chuck Bound video. You'll find out. Some of you may know the reason why already, but you'll see when it gets posted. I can't wait to share it with you guys. It's going to be very exciting. Very exciting. I will try not to cancel myself in the meantime. Okay. Let's see. We'll do here. Let's get another question. Here we go. Next question here, folks. Who performed driving stunts in Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina? So 3 different movies. Who performed driving stunts in Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina? The International Trombone Handshake. There you go. I like it. It was fun times. I was in the marching band a couple of years. Yeah, we played at football games and stuff like that. I didn't do it all 4 years. I didn't really like it the first year. We didn't really get uniforms. We wore t-shirts and slacks. And then we got the uniforms by my 4th year. And that was kind of cool. That was kind of fun. Who performed driving stunts in Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina? Those are 3 different movie titles. They're in quotes. Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina. Oh, we got guesses for Stanton Barrett. We got guesses for Darrell Waltrip and Elvis Presley. Soapy Castles, Tom Cruise, Buddy Baker. This is a good one. Who performed driving stunts in Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina? This is from April. Interesting comments, though. Again, I'm glad there was a good discussion. Earlier. Again, I know it's like slogging through the mud there with that. I mean, I really tried. There's other ways that sports commentators are able to really blur, I mean, stuff that happens into the topic of their show a lot better. I confess that's not one of my strong suits. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get better with time. I got to practice it at some time, folks. But yeah, this is definitely meant to be more definitely more of a racing show on that. Oh, people picking their categories. Right on. Alrighty. Who performed driving stunts in Speedway, Six Pack, and Thunder in Carolina? Those are the questions. And the answer is Neil Soapy Castles. So they're a video subject. Neil Soapy Castles. A lot of you got that one. Right on. Glad. I hope you guys saw the video too. Maserati 9, you were the first one on that. 611 Hornet, you as well. There were a couple others I saw that got it as well. Yeah, Willie B got it there too. All right. So we'll probably do one more question here. What are we up to? Oh gosh, we're almost 2 hours. It has been a long show. All right, thank you guys for sticking around. I know on an odd time here, Monday night show, it's a bit long, but we'll definitely we'll wrap up here with this one. Oh, okay, this will be a good one to wrap up with. Last question for the evening, folks. What former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was program director at Charlotte in 1960? Ooh, there's a tasty one. Let's do this. What former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was program director at Charlotte in 1960? Now, this is it's interesting how this question is phrased. Is it, are we talking about a champ that was after 1960, or were they a champion before 1960? I mean, as far as I know, it'd probably be the whole period because, but then again, we're talking about the program director in 1960, so I guess it would have to be a champion before then. So never mind. I'm getting too used to diagramming this stuff out, and I'm just overcomplicating it. Okay, yeah, in 1960, what former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was a program director? I guess unless they were really young, but how would they become program director? No, forget it. Overcomplicating it. I had to do a lot of tech support today, folks, so that's kind of where I'm coming from here. All right. What former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was program director at Charlotte in 1960? Yeah, it is really vague. I don't know. Bobby Allison, Taylor Swift, Ned Jarrett, Doug Hudson, Curtis Turner, Rex White, Tim Flock, Red Farmer, Denny Hamlin. You run a Taylor Swift car? Yeah, you never know. Yeah, program director does sound like a TV position, not the track. Good point, RD Fox. What former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was program director at Charlotte in 1960? I guess he could have been like in his maybe 30s and then maybe got into racing in his 50s and then won a championship. I don't know who would even fit that. That's tough. I honestly don't know the answer to this. What former NASCAR Winston Cup champ was program director at Charlotte in 1960? Alrighty, here we go. Here comes the answer, folks. You ready? The answer is Tim Flock. A couple of you guys got that. Tim Flock is the correct answer. Maserati 9, you got it. Were you the first one to get it? Oh, you got, Blake Thiemann, you put Bob Flock. You were very close. Maserati 9, looks like, yeah, I think you were the, nope, Amy, you got it too. Good for you. There you go. A couple people got it. Tim Flock. Correct. Don't make full costume suits on human characters or else it's creepy. No tires, just gas. I don't know what you're... I think I missed the other half of that conversation. Okay. Could somebody in charge of putting together the program books for each race? Oh, that could be it. Yeah, there you go. I mean, maybe somebody familiar with the drivers to kind of get driver profiles. I guess that could be it. But okay, well, there you go. Well, a couple of you got that one. Well, fantastic. Well, that will do it for the show this evening. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I know it was a bit of a long haul and a bit later after the race today. But again, congratulations to Chris Buescher on his second consecutive Cup Series victory. Yeah, tremendous weekend. Again, feeling very positive about it. In spite of all the craziness we had last week, still feeling very positive about the action we actually saw on the track itself here. We'll see. I mean, are we going to see a complete mess at the Indy Infield Road Course next week? Is this going to be the last one before they bring back the Brickyard 400 on the oval? Sounds like there's going to be a tire test there. That seems to be indicating the latter rather than the former. Who knows? We're going to find out. But our next show is going to be next Sunday after the conclusion of the Cup Series race of the Indy Infield Road Course. We'll talk about the Xfinity Series race there, as well as the Truck Series race at IRP. I think that's one you got to circle on your calendar there. They put on a fantastic race, just chef kiss last year at IRP, and that's fantastic. So let's find out what happens between those three races. In the meantime, my Twitter feed is at LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And, of course, the website is lastcar.info. The article on Kyle Busch will be coming up later tonight. New video for those of you in the $5 level tomorrow. And lots more coming up after that. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and sticking around here. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you on Sunday.